Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into Management Consulting Journal. In today's video, we're just going to look at how to synthesize and conclude everything that we learned from the case in all the previous sections. So we just want to group information together into logical conclusions and make a recommendation and make sure that we state the recommendation first and then all of our supporting arguments after that. So let's now just look into a really fun example of how to do this. Suppose you're a doctor and a little girl named Sarah walked into our office and she's sick and her parents are like, "What's wrong with her? Can you help us?" And so you take Sarah's temperature and you find that she's at 102 degrees Fahrenheit or 39 degrees Celsius. You ask her parents and you find out that she hasn't ate in 2 days, and she also played with her best friend Katie, who had chickenpox a week ago. So based on these facts, you can conclude some findings as, oh, she has elevated temperature, loss of appetite, and she had exposure to chickenpox a week ago. And with these findings, you conclude that Sarah has chickenpox as well, just like her best friend Kate. And the recommendations could be rest in bed, drink fluid, and limit the amount of scratching that she does. And there's Sarah. She doesn't look very happy. So that is the process that we go through to come up with a recommendation. However, when we want to present this to our client, or in this case, Sarah's parents, we want to do this in the exact opposite direction. So it's kind of counterintuitive because you work in this fashion. You gather the facts and the findings and you synthesize everything together into the conclusion and the recommendation. But the way you want to present it is the exact opposite direction. You want to present your recommendation first, then your conclusion, then findings and facts if necessary. So you want to tell Sarah's parents, Sarah has chickenpox, and what you should do is let her rest in bed a lot, drink a lot of fluids, and limit the amount of scratching she does. I concluded that she has chickenpox because her temperature is above average, she has a loss of appetite, and she had exposure to chickenpox a week ago. And these are all things that led me to make this conclusion. So what I want you to do right now is just pause this video and come up with your recommendation for our client, the educational provider. For those of you who are confused, you should go back and watch the entire series to find out, because we've been doing a practice case along each section. So you should go back and watch those videos. And what I want you to do is just come up with a recommendation for the educational provider, and we're going to take up a sample case in just a bit. So see you guys in a bit. So hopefully by now you have come up with your own recommendation for our client, the educational provider. So here is a sample of what I would say as a recommendation. I would say, dear Mrs. CEO, thank you very much for hiring us as your consultant on this case. I would recommend that you start offering on-demand pre-recorded training to your students. This is because students are looking for low-cost ways to educate it, and we already see the shift of them switching to competitors who are offering these $30 courses, pre-recorded courses. And that's one of the reasons why we experience a loss of students. And also the students are becoming more money conscious due to the downturn in the economy. And another reason why you should offer the pre-recorded training is because they're inexpensive to produce. During analysis, we found that you can just record your lectures from in class and then just put them online. So it costs you almost next to nothing just to put out this product. So you can see that what I did there is I stated the recommendation first, then I talked about my conclusions, then I talked about my findings, and I talked about it in sort of a very logical way, which is a method that you should approach your case interviews in as well. So hopefully that gives you some ideas. You could have different recommendations other than this. There could be multiple recommendations in one case. I just went through one. In this case, there could be, 2 or 3 recommendations with different conclusions and findings under each. I just didn't do a very comprehensive list right here. So it's totally okay if you had a different recommendation and conclusions and findings as well. So let's put everything together. So this is what I talked about earlier. So first you have your engagement objective, which is the output of define the problem, and then you just want to come up with different issues underneath the engagement objective, and then come up with the hypothesis for that, which we did in restructure the problem, and then we come up with our key questions in experiment and test the hypothesis. And with the output of that, we have our facts. Then we synthesize that into our findings. Then we come up with our conclusions based on our findings, and finally we come up with our recommendation. So I just want to point out that this is the direction of the engagement objective. However, when we want to state our recommendation, we want to do it in the exact opposite direction. So our recommendations should be supported by the data gathered through this entire process. So just to recap, first we just want to define the problem, really figure out what the problem that it is that the client is experiencing. So often the times, as we saw in the first video in this series, the problem that you're given at the beginning of the case is not really the true problem of the case. And after we went through the structure to come up with the problem, we'll come up with another structure just to tackle this problem, which brings us to the second session, restructure the problem. And after that, we come up with experiments and tests for each of the hypotheses that we came up with in the second stage, to either prove or disprove those hypotheses with data. And based on that information, we come up with the root cause of why the problem is happening. And in the fourth stage, what we want to do is just brainstorm all the possible options that the client can take, and we select the best one based on CCR, the client's criteria for success, the constraints that the client is facing, and the risk associated with each option. And once we come up with that conclusion, we just want to put it into a lovely tree, like something like this, and present it to the client. So and make sure that we present the recommendation first, then our conclusion and some of our and backed by our findings. So this is the entire DRESS framework, and this is how you should be approaching your case interviews in. And as always, thank you so much for sticking around for this entire series. And please sign up for a free consultation if you have an upcoming case interview and you want to break into the management consulting industry. Questions or comments, leave it below or email us at info@managementconsultingjournal.com. Thanks guys so much for sticking around. I'll see you in future videos. Thank you. Bye.